Everyone who knows St Mary's the Mount Roman Catholic Primary School in Walsall knows it's in Jesson Road, quite a distance from the church in Glebe Street it shares its name with. Most people also know that it wasn't always so far away, that it used to be right next to the church, standing on the hillside above Vicarage Place, sandwiched between the burial ground and the old Sister Dora Hospital next door. For 120 years it had been there, till a fire took hold in the boiler room one night in 1967, and did so much damage that the place couldn't be saved and ended up having to be demolished. I went back to the site 4 years later and took these pictures. All the buildings had gone and most of the rubble had been cleared away. It was such a sad spectacle to me. The old top steps were still there at that time, next to the high buttressed retaining wall, and you could still see the shadow of what had been a small cloakroom against the wall of the hospital next door. One of the gateposts still remained also from the entrance to the girls' playground, and the original rough gates made of angle iron were still in place at the bottom of the steps. Many years have passed since then. Those of us who remember the old school are getting older ourselves, and we're also getting fewer. It dawned on me one day that there aren't any photographs that show the whole school. Its hemmed-in location meant that you could never get far enough away to get any decent shots without having your line of vision blocked by one thing or another. Somebody in a helicopter would have been able to get some brilliant shots flying over the place, but I don't think that ever happened somehow. I launched a public appeal for pictures, but that only produced a very small result, with tantalising glimpses of small corners of the buildings only, or else very fuzzy long-distance views that didn't really show the school in any kind of recognisable detail. I finally realised that the only hope of showing future generations what the old school used to look like would be for me to do some careful drawings of it myself. The first rough sketch I did, entirely from memory, showed me what a monumental task it was going to be, and for a while I was floundering. Then a friend told me about a free computer program I could use to actually build a three-dimensional model of the whole school in virtual reality, one that could be viewed from any angle. That was just the answer I was looking for. It didn't take me long to learn how to use the new program, and then the long rebuild began. It's taken me just over a year to complete the model, and a while longer to produce this demonstration film, but here it is, a virtual tour around the old St Mary's the Mount School by the church. Let's turn back time. This is the extended car park where the school used to stand. Can't quite imagine it. Well, if we colour in where the buildings used to be, this'll give you a better idea perhaps. Still a bit vague? Okay, let's superimpose this old plan drawing. Does this give you a better picture? Let's lose the photo to make it clearer. Now, if we put in the roof details, then give it some depth, and finally, let's bring it all back to life. This is how it would have looked from the air, built on a steep slope with those steps running down the whole side of it, all the way from the church down to Vicarage Place. Here's our starting point in the old separate infants' playground, with a line painted across marking the boundary with the juniors' playground, over which the infants were forbidden to cross. Let's approach the top of the old steps now, but before we go down, here's another quick look at the aerial view to remind us where we are headed. Now let's go down, past the kitchen door to the girls' playground. There's the main entrance. This is the view that was shown in the paper after the fire, with firemen on the roof making sure there was nothing loose likely to fall and injure anyone. This was another picture from the paper, taken at the same time. It looks like they're passing down loose slate patterns. Let's remember it in its glory days, though. The steps down the side there led to the girls' toilets and also the boiler room. Of course we boys never got to see what it was like down there, but now that there's no one about, let's have a look, eh? I guess it was a lot darker and gloomier down here in real life, but I hope I've got this right otherwise from the plans I've been working from. Cubicles on the right with their dingy little windows, and on the left, the boiler room. This is where the big fire started, hence my jokey wall decoration, but it wasn't the least bit funny at the time. As they say in the movies, let's get out of here. Back up the narrow steps to the girls' playground again. Turn round and let's look at the main doors again. What was in there? Well, let's take the lid off and have a look. Ah, a couple of wash basins and 2 staff toilets that were put in around 1959, just the time that I started here. Beyond that was the head teacher's office. I remember having to go in there just twice during my time at the school. Coming back down to earth, let's go inside. The first classroom was right above the boiler room. This was class 1 in my day, Mrs. Dickens's class. Next door was class 2, separated by these folding partitions from class 3. The room overlooked by that big internal window up there. Class 3 also had its own exit, leading out by the bottom of the stairs. But first let's go back outside. At the top of those stairs was the school kitchen, but what many people might not know was that it had been built as an extension, added in 1894, to be used as a cloakroom, with a new entrance from the steps at the side here. At that time these covered stairs here hadn't been built, and what's more, the space underneath this new extension had been all open, like this. It was built on these thick concrete pillars, which were later closed in to look the way my generation remember it. Sports equipment used to be stored in there, as far as I know. As for these stairs, they'd been added some time later as outside steps to begin with, before they'd been roofed over to give better protection against the weather. Back inside, the stairs led up to the kitchen, always out of bounds to us, and into the assembly hall where we met every morning. This end could be partitioned off as a classroom, but was mainly used as a dining room, the food being served through this hatchway from the kitchen beyond. The hall was bisected by 2 parallel folding partitions that could form a corridor straight across when required. Another partition at the far end separated a 3rd classroom and marked the position of a stage whenever school plays or operettas were put on. Sometime during my time at the school, this giant paper school badge appeared above the stage area. I don't know who'd made it, but it was quite impressive, I remember, and it stayed in place until the fire, as far as I know, so we'll leave it there. The door at the other end of the partition corridor led to another cloakroom outside another classroom. This was called Form 1 in my day, and it was where I was taught by Mrs. Huband. We emerged from here into the boys' playground. There, at the far end, was that small cloakroom we saw the shadow of on my old photograph. Tucked away in the corner were the boys' toilets. These were open to the sky, and just as well. They could get pretty pongy sometimes in hot weather. While we're here, we might as well go in. There was the wall with the channel at the foot, and just 4 cubicles. Right, that's enough. Let's get out. Where shall we look next? Peep in the windows of the small cloakroom, perhaps? Ah, this brings back memories. We used to use this bit of double thickness wall as a goal mouth. The cloakroom used to lead off from the extended classroom at the end of the hall, the one with these dormer windows at the top, and the internal one looking down onto class 3 below. There's the partition from the hall. We're at the back of the stage now, and the doorway out leads to the little cloakroom. This was another view that appeared in the newspaper, when they showed the children emerging carrying books rescued from the fire, on their way to temporary school in Bath Street. What shadows from the past. A quick look through the windows into the larger cloakroom. And there's the way out, leading to the steps. The older boys were allowed up top at playtimes. Here we could play in front of the church, or round the hut, an extra classroom built in the 1940s. This is where the children were mustered in readiness for the May procession. The lady in the stripy hat is the legendary Mrs. Dickens, while the taller of the 2 ladies on the right looks very much like Miss Keats, the last headmistress of the separate infants' school, before infants and juniors were amalgamated at Jesson Road. And that, as they say, is more or less it. My recreation of the old school next to the church. I've tried to include as much authentic detail as I could, like these finials and ridge tiles on the roof. Not to mention the old rusty iron gates at the foot of the steps. But all things must pass, to quote George Harrison, and these distinctive old buildings eventually outlived their usefulness. That doesn't stop us remembering them with great affection, especially those of us still living who were taught in them. For us, they'll forever remain a part of who we are, just as the children of Jesson Road will always remember their school, and carry their own fond memories of it with them to the end of their days.